Good morning, Morai, Rabotai, Bruchim Abayim. We are continuing on Masechet Rosh Hashanah. We are on Daf Chet, Amud Aleph, 5 lines down from the top of the Amud. Today's Amud is being learned as a Zchut Refuah Shalema for Daniel, Moshe, Ben Farangis, Abraham, Rachel Simcha Bad Nahid, also dedicated for Refuah Shalema of Catherine, Esther, Bat Flora, Shtar Refuah Shalema, the mother of one of our own Amud Yomi Chevra. Today's Amud is also being learned as a zchut for the neshama of Betzalel ben Rafael Esther and Leilu Nishmat Esther bat Naftali Tzvi Alevi. This month's learning of the community has been dedicated graciously by the Shea family and Mahbubi families. It should be an ultimate zchut for all of their mishpachot be'ezrat Hashem. Amen.
Amen.
So we started the second element of the Mishnah, and that is Maser Be'ema. Maser Be'ema, Rabbi Meir said the Rosh Hashanah Maser Be'ema is Rosh Chodesh Elul, and Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon said it's Be'echad Be'tishrei is Rosh Chodesh Tishrei. We mentioned that the year of the birth of every new animal has to be measured, because you can't give Maser Behema from 1 year's babies on another year's babies. So if you say Be'echad Be'elul, means any baby animal that was born in your cattle, in your flock before Echad Be'elul, is going to be last year's group, and you're going to separate them and give Maser, tithe that separately, and anything after Echad Be'elul is going to be next year's. And same would be if it's Betishrei. So the machloket is in that 1 month, where exactly you're going to categorize them, and that will be important, as we'll see in just a moment. Now the Gemara says, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, v'shnehem mikra echad darshu. Both Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Lazar and Rabbi Shimon, they are dashing the same exact pasuk. Surprisingly, it's not that they're coming off from different sources. The source is Mikra Echad Darshu. The same pasuk is what they are arguing about. Shnemar, as the pasuk says in Tehillim. Pasuk says, Lavshu karim ason, ve'amakim yatfu bar, yitroa'u af yashiru. Now, what does that mean exactly? Lavshu karim ason means the time that the tzon gets pregnant. This is the mating season of the tzon, and that, when is that? V'amakim yatfu bar. This is where the valleys are covered with the produce. That means they have grown enough that you clearly see the growth when you overlook the valley. You see the produce growing out of the ground. Yashiru, which means the produce, when it's fully grown to the degree that the actual kernels of wheat become hardened, and they're long enough that when the wind blows, they hit each other and they make a noise that looks like they are singing. Yitro'au af yashiru. So Rabbi Meir Savar. So how do you read the pasuk? You have to say that this is connected, obviously, if they're mentioned in the same pasuk, lavshu karim atzon, which is the time of the mating season of the animals. And then you have the description of the growth of the produce in its different stages. So Rabbi Meir Sava, Rabbi Meir holds, Ematai lavshu karim atzon. When is the season of the mating of the tzon, of the cattle? Bizman shamakim yatvu bar. That is when the beginning process of the growth of the produce is happening. And when is that? Ve'matayamakim yatvu bar be'adar. That we know already to be in Adar. So therefore, once we know when the mating season is, and we know this is, we're talking about tzon. So Be'mataka, as we mentioned before, the pregnancy season is 5 months, right? The pregnancy duration, rather, is 5 months. So if he starts Badar, you'll have Nisan, Iyar, Sivan, Hamuz, and Av. So they'll give birth on Av. Ba'adar mitaberot ba'adar v'yoldot be'av. That would be the duration. And once they give birth in Av, Rosh Hashanah is going to be when? After Av. It's going to be in Elul. Rosh Hashanah shelahen Elul. That's the explanation of Rabbi Meir's Shita. Rabbi Meir says, look, I see it in the Pasuk. The Pasuk tells me that the season of the mating of these animals is when Amakim Yatvu Bar. That we know it to be in Adar. So you make the cheshbon from Adar to Av. In Av is the birth season, and that will make it that Elul, the following month, is the Rosh Hashanah. Right? That's pretty end 1 year of your cattle giving birth, and the next year starts the following month. It's very pashut. Says Rabbi Lazar, Rabbi Shimon, same pasuk. Say no, wait a second. You're ignoring the last piece of the pasuk. The pasuk doesn't just say Lavshu karim ason ve'amakim yatvu bar. There is the rest of the pasuk, right? Yitroa'u af yashiru. What do you do with that? Now, obviously, he's coming to add something. So says the Gemara, Rabbi Lazar, Rabbi Shimon, Omrim, Matai lavshu karim ason. When is the season of the mating of lavshu karim ason? Not amakim yatvu bar, but mainly bisman sheyitroa'u af yashiru. When the produce is large enough, has grown enough, that is hardened and it's long, that when the wind blows, you can hear them bang to each other, and it's like a shira. It's like music. So when is that? Matashi bolim omrot shira. When do they make this noise that looks like Nisan? That's not in Adar. That's in Nisan. 1 full month later. So says the Gemara. Now do the cheshbon. It's simple. The rest of it follows. Mit abrot ben Nisan. If you say the mating season is in Nisan, obviously 5 months later is going to be Yoltot be'elul. And if the month of birth usually is in Elul, then obviously Rosh Hashanah and Tishrei. Like the next month is going to be Tishrei. So they're mamash following the same pattern. It's just the question is, where do you compare the Lavshu Kari Mason? Do you compare the beginning part of the pasuk Lavshu Kari Mason, which is the pregnancy of the cattle, to the stage, the beginning of the produce of Amakim Yatvu Bar, or to the end of the pasuk that says Yitroa'u af Yashiru? Is it going to be the beginning of the process of the growth and the blooming and the blossoming, or is it the end ready to be harvested? So it says these two, both Rabbi Meir and also Rabbi Lazar, Rabbi Shimon, have to deal with each other. It's the same pasuk. After all, you can't ignore one out of the 3 parts of the pasuk. Even Rabbi Meir has to deal with the end of the pasuk that says Yitroa'u. Gemara says no. Hahu be'afelata. That is talking about some animals. It's a season, right? The mating season is exactly that. It's a season. There is the majority, and then there is always those who are late, right? So that's ba'afelata. It's talking about those who are doing it later, but we go with the majority, and that is in Adar, not in Nisan. But ba'afelata davyan ben Nisan. The late ones are in Nisan. Idach nami, and says the Gemara, Rabbi Lazar and Rabbi Shimon also have to deal with Rabbi Meir. The pasuk says, after all, Amakim Yatvu Bar, which is the earliest stage. Gemara says, Hahu bechorfiata. Rabbi says that's no. The main season is Nisan, but there are those animals who made earlier, and that is in Adar. We go after the majority, right? Go after the majority. Very much sensible. So the Gemara says, wait a second. I understand that you both throw at each other the same answer, but there is an order to the psukim. The pasuk actually says it the way he wants you to understand it. So says the Gemara, Bishlam al Rabbi Meir. I understand according to Rabbi Meir, Dichtiv Lavshu Karimason. The flow of the pasuk, the chronology of the pasuk follows very nicely. Remember, how is it according to Rabbi Meir? Rabbi Meir is the one that says the mating season is in Adar. So the pasuk reads very flawlessly. Lavshua Karimason, that's the season of the mating of your cattle. When V'amakim Yatvubar, that is when the valleys are seen with the produce. That's the earliest stage. When is that? In Adar. And then it says, Yitra'af Yashiru, that there are those later ones that they do in Nisan as well. But we go after Adar because that's the main. So the order, the chronology of the pasuk reads very well, right? The comparison of the cattle is with Amakim Yatfu Bar, which is the earliest stage in Adar, to tell you that the Lafshu Karimason also starts in Adar. The pregnancy starts in Adar, and hence Av should be when they give birth. But then the pasuk also goes out of its way to tell you that there are, however, those later ones that happen in Nisan. Fine, but according to the Rabbi Shimon, let's read this what we explained inside the Gemara. There are those later ones that are going to be in Nisan. Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon, according to Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon doesn't read well. If Chami Ba'ile, it should be the middle and the end of the pasuk should be in reverse order. It should say, Lav Shukari Mason, when Bizman Sheitro'ahu Af Yashiru, because that's the main part in Nisan, and only then he should tell you, Ikanami Ta'amakim Yatfu Bar, there are those who were as early as Adar. That's how you should say it. And this is strong enough of a question that the Gemara says, you know what? Good question. Ella, says the Gemara, retracts. Amar Rava. Rava says no. The Kula Alma Lav Shukari Mason Bizman Shamakim Yatfor. Everyone agrees with this read that Lav Shukari Mason, the mating season of your cattle is when it's Amakim Yatfu Bar, which is in Adar. Everyone agrees with that. Here, there is another player in this topic. The pasuk about giving masrot, we're talking about maser be'ema here, right? So the pasuk about giving masrot compares your maser tvuah and masar be'ema. The full pasuk reads, aser ta'aser et kol tvuat zaracha yoseh hasadeh shana shana. Aser ta'aser is a double language, right? And it's not just coming to tell you give 20% because aser ta'aser two masrot, but it's coming to compare two different types of masrot. It's talking about two different masrot. One of them is maser takan. Echad maser behema ve'echad maser takan. One is maser behema, and the other one is maser takan from your produce. So your animals, your cattle, and your produce, you're going to be tithing. You're going to give maser from. So Rabbi Meir Savar Makish Maser Bemal Maser Tagan. Rabbi Meir says, when the pasuk says Aser Ta'aser is coming to compare Maser Be'emat to Maser Dagan. What is the comparison? Ma Maser Dagan Samuch Legomro Isuro. Just like by Maser Dagan, it's right at the time that it finishes is the Maser, is the time of Maser. Af Maser Be'ema Samuch legomro isuro. Maser Bema also is right at the time of its finishing. That is when you're going to be giving Maser. That means Rosh Hashanah for Maserot is Tishrei. We know that already, right? That's the Rosh Hashanah for Maserot. We're going to have this in Daf Yud Bet Amud Aleph, upcoming in our Gemara. and Tishrei is right samuch to the Gmar of the Yemot HaChama. You put it from the time of harvest, it's Nisan and so on. You put it the entire summer season. You lay them in your field to dry up. If you enter them to the silos to your house, to the storage houses, when you harvest them, they're going to all get moldy because they have moist inside. So they spread them to dry the entire hot season of Yemot Chama, and then they take them in, and that's ready for Maserot. And therefore, says Rabbi Meir, Maser Bema also is going to be samuch le gomro isuro. And that is going to be when? That's going to be in, what's Rabbi Meir's shita? Be'echad be'elul, right? And Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon say no. They also say that Pasuk is coming to compare Maser Be'ema Maser Dagan. Aser Ta'aser is coming to compare them together. Ma Maser Dagan Rosh Hashanah Shelo Tishrei. But it's not in logic, but it is in actuality. Just like Maser Dagan, the Rosh Hashanah is in Tishrei, as we'll see in Daf Yud Bet, Maser Bema also is going to be Rosh Hashanah Shelo Tishrei. That's how we learn it. It's a very straightforward comparison from the Pasuk speaking directly about Maserot. One of them, Rabbi Meir learns that when you compare things, it has to be comparing formulas. It's not comparing the realities, but it's the formula. When you have Maaser Dagan and it's Samuch Legomro Isuro, which would give you Tishrei, by Behema also is going to be Samuch Legomro Isuro, which again, according to everyone we said, the pregnancy period starts from Adar and ends in Av, which would make Samuch Legomro, right after its Gemar would be Rosh Chodesh Elul. The other one says, I understand that, but Aser Ta'aser is not coming to tell you formula. It's coming to tell you actuality. That the Rosh Hashanah of both Maaser Be'ema and Maaser Dagan is the same. Aser Ta'aser, just like by Maaser Dagan, the Rosh Hashanah is Echad B'Tishrei. By Maaser Be'ema also, the Rosh Hashanah is going to be Echad B'Tishrei. So that's why we have the legitimacy of each one of these shitas that are mentioned in our Mishnah, back in Daf that Rabbi Meir holds Rosh Hashanah leMaaser Be'ema is going to be Echad Be'elul, and Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Nazar hold is going to be Be'echad B'Tishrei. Fine, says the Gemara. Be'echad B'Tishrei Rosh Hashanah leShanim. Now we're going to the next element of our Mishnah. The Mishnah said Be'echad B'Tishrei Rosh Hashanah leShanim v'leShemitin u'liovelot leNetiah u'liyerakot. Echad B'Tishrei is Rosh Hashanah for all these things. So says the Gemara, one by one. When he says Rosh Hashanah Leshanim, it is the beginning of the year, Echad B'Tishrei, L'may Nafkamina. I want to know when to dip the apple in the honey. What is that exactly the halachic nafkamina of Be'echad B'Tishrei Rosh Hashanah Leshanim? The Gemara says, surprisingly, L'may Hilcheta, what's the halachic difference? Amar Papa L'Shtarot. The halacha is for shtarot. That's the difference that he makes. Ditran, as we learn, shtarei chov hamuktamim psulim vehameucharin ksherin. Right? This is what we discussed already in Daf Bet. At length, that shtarei chov that are dated earlier than they were written, they are pasul. Right? You remember, because you create a chov, an obligation of shi'ibud, when you write a shtar, and therefore your Baal Chov could be actually Toref, could be collecting from anything that you had at the time of the Chov. So therefore, if you date earlier something, you're going to be damaging the Lekufot, and that you're not allowed to do. Therefore, Chazal hassled the Shtarei Chov HaMukdamim. If something was predated, it was earlier than the actual date, is pasul. Right? So says the Gemara, Let's go back to our first element. First thing we learned in the Mishnah was Be'echad benisan Rosh Hashanah lemelachim. And when we asked what's the nafkamina, what was the answer? Ve'amrina lemai hilcheta. What's the halachic difference? That Echad benisan is Rosh Hashanah lemelachim. Ve'amar Rav Chisda. Rav Chisda was telling us there the shtarot is coming to tell you shtarot. So now you can't have it both ways. Over there, he told me that Rosh Hashanah l'shtarot is Echad b'Nisan. Over here, now you're telling me that Echad b'Tishrei is Rosh Hashanah l'Shanim, and you're telling me that Shanim makes a difference in Shnei HaMelech, in shtarot, basically. What year you write, what year of this king you write in the shtar is the nafkamina of Rosh Hashanah l'Shanim. And over there, he told me also the same thing by Echad b'Nisan. So which one is it? Is it Echad b'Nisan Rosh Hashanah lemelachim for the shtarot, or is Echad b'Tishrei Rosh Hashanah leshanim, which is also lemelachim for shtarot? Can be both. So says the Gemara. Look, Kasha, it's not a question. Kan lemalchei Israel, kan lemalchei umot haolam. We discussed this already before. Nisan is for Malchei Israel, and Tishrei is for Malchei Umot HaOlam. Now, we know what the massive problem with this is. This we learned in the name of Rav Chisda, right? Rav Chisda and Rav Gimel Amud Aleph said this earth-shattering chidush that by Echad ben Nisan, Rosh Hashanah lemelachim is only by Jewish kings, but by Goyish kings is going to be Echad b'Tishrei. And we were so excited hearing this chidush from Rav Chisda. Turns out, really, this Rav Chisda is a Mishnah. So Rav Chisda came to teach us a Mishnah. Just read on in the Mishnah and you'll chap. What do you need in quote unquote earth-shattering chidush from Rav Chisda? Says the Gemara. אלא הדאמר רב חיסדא לא שנו אלא למלכי ישראל, אבל למלכי אומות העולם מתשרים מענינן. This Rav Chisda said, Echad ben Nisan is only for Malchei Israel, but for Goyish kings we go after Tishrei, Echad b'Tishrei. That's a Mishnah. Rav Chisda matnitin ata lashmoinan. He's coming to teach me a Mishnah. I knew the Mishnah already. The Gemara says no. Rav Chisda lo. Rav Chisda karai ata lashmoinan. Chisda is not coming to teach you a Mishnah. Rav Chisda is coming to teach the source of this Mishnah. Where is the source of this Mishnah? Is from the pasuk, right? In other words, the Mishnah is clearly indicating that by Rosh Hashanah, by Rosh Chodesh Tishrei is Rosh Hashanah Leshanim, which means there are going to be a new count for shtarot from Echad b'Tishrei. But we don't know where we get this from until we learn Rav Chisda, which the Gemara darshan in Daf Gimel. Or I could answer a little bit more sophisticated answer. Says the Gemara, Rav Chisda Rabbi Zera matila. The Rav Chisda holds like Rabbi Zera, that Rabbi Zera said, matnila. The Rabbi Zera amar litkufa. What does he mean? Rabbi Zera holds, V'baitem Rav Chisda Rabbi Zera matnila. The Rabbi Zera amar litkufa. Rabbi Zera holds, this is Rosh Hashanah leshalim for tkufot. What does that mean? Tkufot means the seasons. Now, seasons change. There are four tkufot. You have Tkufat Tishrei, you have Tkufat Nisan, then you have Tammuz and Tevet, right? So by Tkufat Tishrei and Nisan, they're the equinoxes, that the times of day and night are almost equal, right? You have the actual equinox, and then you have the Tkufah that comes with it. Those are the more moderated seasons of spring and fall, right? Then you have the seasons of the summer and winter, which in summer season, in Tkufat Tammuz, the days are much longer, and in Tkufat Tevet, the nights are much longer, right? So those Tkufot, where do you start counting them from? From the creation of the world, right? Because the creation of the world will be the beginning point of that, and that's Echad b'Tishrei, because Rabbi Zera holds like Rabbi Eliezer. Now, this is a machloket, which is a larger than life machloket. We got to get to explain this. Bezrat Hashem, there's machloket in Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yoshua, whether it's Betishrei Nivra Ha'olam or Benisan Nivra Ha'olam, whether the world was created in Tishrei or the world maybe perhaps was created in Nisan. And you'll ask yourself, like, how is that possible even, right? We thought that it's pashut that the world was created in Tishrei, right? Rabbi as it may, that's Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Eliezer holds Betishrei Nivra Olam, and Rabbi Zera holds like Rabbi Eliezer he Damar Betishrei Nivra Olam, and he's coming to tell you Rosh Hashanah for the Shanim, which means for the count of these four kufot of the year round. Kufa, by the way, comes from the language hakafa, right? It's the cycle of the years, seasons, right, are started from Tishrei because says Rabbi Zera, like Rabbi Eliezer, that the beginning point of all seasons ever was from Tishrei because Tishrei was the birthday of the world. And Rabbi Chisda, when he says to you that is Rosh Hashanah Shalim, what is coming to tell you is really the chidush of Rabbi Zera, not necessarily legabe the halachot of tarot. Okay, so meaning this Mishnah is for Shanim is coming to tell you Rabbi Zera, and therefore Rabbi Chisda was telling you actually an earth-shattering chidush. So says Gemara, how do I even know that is starting from Rosh Hashanah, from Tishrei? Dichtiv Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak Amar, sorry. Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak says, Ledin is Rosh Hashanah for the din. That's what he means when we say Rosh Hashanah. Leshanim is not necessarily talking about shtarot, but it's coming to tell you that the new year and New Year's resolutions, when HaKadosh Baruch Hu looks at people's actions and paskins what's going to happen with them, that is going to happen in Echad B'Tishrei, as it says, Mirashit Hashana ad Acharit Shana, Mirashit Hashana Nidon Ma Yeheh Besofa. A person is judged from the beginning of the year what's going to happen to him towards the end, till the end of the year. And how do I know that that's Tishrei? Because it says, Tik'u b'chodesh shofar, v'keseh le'yom chagenu. That pasuk clearly indicates that we are talking about Rosh Hashanah because the only moed that the chodesh, v'keseh le'yom chagenu, that the moon is covered on the Chag is Rosh Hashanah because it's the first of month when the moon is still invisible. It's a very, very small thing. We're going to come back to this with a fascinating insight of the Satmar Rav. The Satmar Rav asked the following question. Satmar Rav said, when he say, "Enei Hashem Elokecha bo mirashit Hashana ad acharit shana," grammatically is incorrect. It should either say, "Your eyes of Hashem is on it mirashit Hashana ad acharit Hashana," with the hey hayediyah, or it should say mirashit Shana ad acharit Shana. Both of those would be correct. You know what's not correct? To say mirashit Hashana ad acharit Shana. Make your mind either with the hay or without this. What is Mirashit Hashana ad acharit Shana? Has a fascinating Musar insight in this that became very famous in his name. And we're going to Bezat Hashem discuss that tomorrow morning in the beginning of the shiur.